Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox. Welcome to another daily movie review video. Today we're going to be talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. The film was directed by Jack Sholder, written by David Chaskin, stars Robert Englund, Mark Patton, Kim Myers, Robert Russler, Koo Gallagher, Hope Lang, Marshall Bell, Melinda Ophi, and others. So yeah, the reason why I ended up revisiting this kind of randomly is that Shudder, the streaming service Shudder, if you're not familiar with it, it's like a horror streaming service, and they've started to put out original content. They get a lot of exclusives over there, and one of them is this documentary called Scream Queen: My Nightmare on Elm Street, which is about the life of actor Mark Patton, who's the lead of Nightmare 2. And so I was like, oh, before I watch the documentary, maybe I should just check out the movie. Just watch the movie. I hadn't watched it in years. I kind of was of the same opinion that a lot of people I think are, is that, you know, it's the lesser of the movies because it is so kind of weird and incongruent. You know, this was before it became a franchise, obviously, before it kind of became more formulaic. So when they came to the sequel, they were kind of legitimately trying to do something different, even with the Freddy character. Now, the only problem with that is that there was kind of an established rule set in the first movie that dictates like how tension is created, because you have to have these rules to understand why you should be afraid or tense for the characters. And when they took more of a possession route with Freddy and how he interacted with people in this one, there isn't really a ton of dream stuff in this, if any at all. It ends up being kind of a psychological drama. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this was a allegory, or in the subtext, it was about kind of being a closeted gay guy. It was kind of baked into the story, and there's a lot of homoerotic stuff in it, and that was always kind of a detriment for people. You know, if you know about the horror community over the years, or whatever, you know, some pretty rough people, some pretty rough opinions. This was always like Nightmare on Gay Street, and you know, other pejoratives. I'm not gonna get into it. Why do that to myself? But yeah, but I just I just thought it was kind of boring. I didn't think it fit in with the rest of the series. Not even that I'm a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. Like, I'm not a giant fan of the series, which is like, I own the box set for some reason. But it's not like one of my favorites. I do enjoy some of them. I will say this right now. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors is the best one. That's the GOAT, everybody. Yeah, so it had been a while, so I watched this, and I definitely had a new appreciation for it, and I kind of respected the fact that they tried to do something different, even though I don't think it worked. And this story, honestly, should not have been a Nightmare on Elm Street story. If this was just its own thing with the same structure and the same things that happen, I think the movie would be a lot better. I think the whole Freddy Krueger thing is a distraction, and it causes people to kind of unfairly dismiss it, because they're like, well, this is not what I understand about Freddy Krueger. This is not what I understand about this universe. Even now, you know, post all the other movies coming out, because there's such an established lore to how it all works at this point. So it's always been one that kind of stuck out, and I enjoyed it a lot more, because you kind of I just had to separate it. You kind of got to separate it out. It's doing its own thing. It probably has one of the more interesting kind of meta level commentary stuff, because it came out in 1985, you know, the beginning of the AIDS pandemic, and about, you know, coming out, or a lot of closeted gay people not feeling comfortable coming out because of the kind of the media landscape and the rhetoric of the time about being gay. And this kind of, in a sort of weird sideways way, addresses sort of some of that stuff. How you feel like it's a monster inside you that's destroying you. And like, I don't like, you know, some people think it's one of these examples of like the demonization of gay people. I didn't really read that into the movie. I just think it's just it's just a metaphor for the painful existence that it is to be not to be able to live freely how you want to live, you know? And you could probably map this onto anything, because famously, and they get into this in the documentary I'm going to talk about, that'll be the next video. They get into this a little bit. David Chaskin for a long time just said, you know, when I wrote it as like to be homophobic. The things that people consider homoerotic, or the subtext is like it's a gay story, were supposed to be homophobic because, again, in the 80s, if you watch a lot of 80s comedies, a lot of 80s horror movies, a lot of throwing pejoratives around, about gay people, or just about, just in the way that, especially guys, even up until when I was a teenager, up until my mid-20s, it was pretty normal to just say, don't be a fag, or hey, that's gay. That was a pretty normal thing. And not that I don't think people meant it in a cruel way, but it is the history of it. It is kind of the etymology of the word is negative, and it has to do with just like masculine ideal natures. And if you don't conform to that, and your friends kind of posturing and calling you out for it, so there is a subconscious layer there that is definitely like homophobic, for sure, 100%. But I don't think consciously most people used it that way. It just became like a swear. It became just a way to shit on your friends. But it does have that component for sure. So it wasn't, when he said that, I was like, yeah, that it would make sense if this was made slightly differently. And a lot of people point to the casting of Mark Patton, who is, at this point in his life, is obviously, he's openly gay. At the time, he was gay. He was in a gay relationship, but he wasn't like openly gay. He wasn't out there as in like an activist sense, right? But apparently, it's just really apparent that he's gay, and just his casting recontextualizes scenes that would have been otherwise seen as just dudes being homophobic. That was the thing. And also casting a male as your final girl, or whatever you want to call it, the focus of the movie, is a lot different than a lot of these movies. So that added this other layer. So it's normally a feminine presence. And if you have Mark Patton, who I'm not like, he's not a stereotype, but he certainly comes off as gay. I don't know how my gaydar is, but he certainly seems gay. Kind of just the way he acts, just his natural presence. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. And I'll get into that when I talk about the documentary, because that's kind of what it's all about. But so I can understand there being two readings on it, and it's the kind of movie that you can actually project a lot onto, and having that planted in your head, definitely you'll see it. I'm not sure if you're just unaware of that, if you would actually see it, if you're just like passively watching it, because it does play out like he's got a girlfriend or a girl that he likes and whatnot. I guess his beard saves him at the end. But so it does have kind of that traditional structure, but it's just all the little things that are there that are homoerotic. They're like whenever he struggles with his physicality, or there might be something homoerotic happening, that's like when the murders happen. Because as a spoiler alert, like like I said earlier, they take a possession angle, and Freddy will possess him, and it's always at these times where you would imagine like somebody would have like a conflict with their sexuality. I noticed that while I was watching. I was like, oh, that's interesting, which is weird because it's not mentioned in the documentary at all. So, hey, good for me. Good for me. I got it. I'm way ahead of the curve here. Spotting. I'm watching those Rob Ager videos. Watching a lot of Kubrick movies lately. Yeah, I'm seeing things everywhere. Patterns. Trust the plan. They're everywhere. But yeah, I don't really have a ton else to say. It's a better movie than I think people give it credit for. It's still kind of mediocre. It's okay. The most interesting thing is the subtext and how it's handled, and how it both delivers on it and then kind of doesn't, because they weren't comfortable at the time, especially at that time, with the AIDS going on, to like actually just make a story about that, more overtly about that. Not that I think you need to, because this is something I criticize all the time in movies. Why is the subtext on the surface? Like, why aren't we kind of just coding this stuff more? It's just more effective that way, I think. And but I think there would have been room just to kind of do this more straightforward, and it would have achieved its goals. And I think the metaphor could have still stayed intact as well. It wouldn't ruin the metaphor. So it would be interesting, I suppose. But it's pretty obvious. It's become kind of a big movie in the gay community and queer cinema history, I guess. That's what people say. I don't know. I'm not a huge, I'm not really into any of these communities in any deep way. I'm a lurker, you know. I just kind of go in, observe, read things, follow conversations. Very rarely ever participate because a lot of times a lot of it's nonsense. But that's just my opinion. Not the queer cinema crowds. I'm just saying genre crowds. There's just a lot of nonsense conversations I just don't feel like even partaking in whatsoever. And maybe I'm creating my own nonsense stuff, so fair enough, right? But yeah, I think that's going to do it for me on this video. Tune in tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about Scream Queen, and my Nightmare on Elm Street, and we'll talk about that and maybe get into some more of the narrative and why Mark Patton, what happened in his life, and why he feels the way he does about this movie. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox and keep up with everything Zoobox, you can check out some links in the description. There's Facebook, Instagram, my personal Twitter. There's also places where you can download the podcast and the weekly movie podcast on iTunes and Spotify and every place you download stuff. If you listen to us on iTunes, appreciate a rate and review. I really would. What else? What else we got to do? Oh, yeah. If you have a request, if you'd like to hear me talk about something specific, or if you're a friend of mine and you want to talk about a movie and we haven't, already discussed movies we're going to talk about in the future, let me know. Drop me a line, a message, or something like that. I'd love to open the weekly show up and get just the widest variety of people talking about the widest variety of movies possible. All right, thanks a lot, everybody, and we will talk to you tomorrow.